Hello, you. Welcome to Obsessed with You, the podcast from fans for fans. My name is Anne, and I'm your host. Well, hello, and welcome back to our second deep dive episode of the season. This time it's an audio only episode, just because I don't feel really well and I don't want to sit in front of a camera and be all happy, But I promise the next episode in 2 weeks will be a video episode again. And yes, that's a threat. I'm sorry. So let's. My voice was gone. So often when I'm scrolling through TikTok or Reddit or something like that, Twitter, I don't know, I'm seeing one thing always popping up, and that is a question if Joe Goldberg is either a sociopath or a psychopath. And since I have a huge interest in psychology and how our brains work and stuff, I thought we should talk about it. Before we start, I should speak out a trigger warning. This episode contains topics like childhood trauma, personality disorders, and mentions suicide. If you don't feel comfortable with these topics right now, then this week's episode is not for you. If you have an acute crisis, you will find contact information in the episode or video description. Always remember, there's no shame in asking for help, and it shows instead how strong you are. And don't forget, staying alive is a choice. So, first things first, I'm obviously not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, not a therapist, nothing like that. I haven't studied the subject, but I did my research. I watched some documentaries, I read papers and interviews, and I even revisited my course I did last year from Yale University, which wasn't really helpful, but I still did. So that's a slay, I guess. Just let us dive right in. So as I said, most people ask if Joe is either a psychopath or a sociopath. And to answer that, we need a little definition of both of these big words, because both display challenging behaviors but differ significantly. Sociopaths tend to be impulsive and struggle to form stable relationships due to their volatile nature. Psychopaths, on the other hand, known for their manipulative tendencies, pose danger to a profound lack of empathy and remorse. Now that we have a definition, which one is it? Well, spoiler alert, none of them. But let's start from the beginning. You premiered on September 9th, 2018 on Lifetime and switched to Netflix for the second and all following seasons on September 26, 2019. And as we all know, the series centers around our favorite stalker, Joe Goldberg, a young man who has a pattern of becoming obsessed with certain women, stalking them, winning them over, and killing anyone around them who he believes has wronged his lover. Those speculations about Joe's mental health were around since season 1, and while he never received an explicit diagnosis in either season of You, many viewers seem to believe he is a psychopath. But here's the thing, according to mental health experts, his mental health is more complicated, especially since the term psychopath doesn't hold much meaning, medically speaking. I'm going to quote Kelly Scott, a therapist at Tribeca Therapy in Manhattan. People use the word psychopath colloquially to describe a person whose behavior defies social norms and conventional understanding of right and wrong. From a clinical perspective, the word psychopath doesn't mean anything. The closest clinical diagnosis for a psychopath or a sociopath, though, is an antisocial personality disorder. And Joe indeed shows some hallmark traits of this. According to Pamela Routledge, a social scientist who researches the intersection of media, human behavior, and neuroscience, the reason why it's difficult to pinpoint a single mental health condition for Joe is the simple fact that You was made for television. He seems to be an amalgam of personality traits at abnormal levels that are constructed to make a good story and create a character that elicits a certain amount of empathy in viewers, despite the fact he murders people. Routledge also added that Joe's actions suggest he has symptoms of certain mental illnesses like antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. According to the National Institute of Health, people with an antisocial personality disorder lack empathy and as a result may act in ways that society considers morally unsound, like manipulating others to get what they want or violating another's privacy. People with a narcissistic personality disorder, on the other hand, have an inflated sense of self-importance and lack empathy for others, which are typical mechanisms used to mask their low self-esteem. And in some ways, Joe embodies both conditions. He's constantly violent when he believes a person has wronged him, a common justification people with both illnesses make for their behavior. Oh my god. A good example here is in season 1, when Joe hits Benji, Beck's boyfriend, locks him in the glass cage, and kills him a few days later. Also later that season, Joe kills Peach, Beck's best friend, because he didn't like how Beck's and Peach's relationship interfered with his and Beck's relationship. He committed all of these heinous and unlawful acts without showing remorse and did so for his own benefit, in this case being closer to Beck, which suggests he could be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. And indeed, people with antisocial personality disorder are more inclined to break the law than those with narcissistic personality disorder. And the fact that Joe comes off as extremely charming from the first time we are introduced to him is another reason he could be a narcissist, something that ranges from the full-blown disorder to a personality trait. Narcissists often fly under the radar because they use their charm and wit to seem normal and unsuspecting. According to Pamela Routledge, Joe's penchant for killing or harming those close to Beck also suggests he's morbidly codependent. People who are severely codependent tend to control their partner or the person they're codependent towards and define themselves primarily in relationships to their partner rather than having their own identity. If we now look at the second season of You, it cuts deeper into Joe's past and uncovers clues that suggest he actually has an attachment disorder. Those disorders typically develop in early childhood when a child has unhealthy or difficult relationships with family due to emotional or physical abuse or neglect, according to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Symptoms here include difficulty managing their emotions, being overly friendly, irritability, and refusing to engage in social situations. Kelly Scott said, and I quote, "Joe Goldberg would be a good example of misdiagnosis. If he was my patient in season 1, sure, he would be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. But upon further excavation, his behavior reveals itself as a trauma symptom versus antisocial personality disorder. The shift in understanding his diagnosis makes You feel like a more realistic portrayal of mental health. Mental health relies on nuance because it is nuance. A diagnosis is almost never clean-cut and disorders overlap. It's not like a strep test with yes, you have strep or no, you don't. It's also important to note that not all people with antisocial personality disorder or an attachment disorder will act violently. That means you don't have to kill someone to get that diagnosis. You can do it in a non-physical way. It can come out in parenting and using a child to meet your own needs in a way that is massively detrimental to your child's needs, like Joe's mother is seen doing in flashbacks during season 2. Those flashbacks help us viewers better understand the root cause of Joe's behavior. And according to Kelly Scott, these scenes led her to believe that Joe acts how he does, not because he lacks empathy and has an antisocial personality disorder, but because his violent and turbulent childhood caused him to develop an attachment disorder. So he was attached to someone, in this case his mom, who was unresponsive to his needs, inconsistent, and not a safe person to him. Joe is positioned as alone in the world, abused and neglected by his own mother. As a result, he later in life becomes obsessively attached to a woman he believes can give him what he needs and is motivated to get the love or the idea of love he craves by any means necessary, by still showing glimpses of empathy. An example for that is a scene in season 2 when Joe looks distraught after he learns Delilah has been killed. This scene proves that Joe has indeed empathy and therefore doesn't have an antisocial personality disorder. Another scene would be when Joe says he won't kill 40 even though he hates him because he means so much to love, which further suggests that Joe has empathy to an extent. So, summarized, we went from believing Joe has an antisocial personality disorder to learn he probably has an attachment disorder. Let us do a little time jump and move to season 4 with an obvious spoiler warning. So, the second half of the season is full of plot twists, including the fact that Reese Montrose isn't the eat the rich killer after all. Instead, it was Joe all along. He just doesn't remember it. It turns out that the Reese we have seen throughout the first half of the season has, for the most parts, been a figment of Joe's imagination. The real Reese doesn't really know who Joe is, since they only met in passing. Joe has been hallucinating Reese in his absence and assumed his identity to carry out some cruel acts, such as kidnapping Marianne and locking her in the glass cage. When Joe learns that Reese has been only in his head and it was himself the whole time, we get, in my opinion, a pretty emotional scene on the bridge. Joe has this epic monologue and he says that he doesn't want to live like that anymore. So he decides to sever ties with the imaginary Reese once and for all, and he throws him from the bridge into the river. Shortly after that, Joe jumps himself, waking up later in the hospital and survives. In one of the last scenes of the season, we see Reese in the reflection of the window when Joe looks at it, suggesting that Joe has simply accepted his dark side. But what does the entire debacle say about Joe's mental state? Does Joe have a particular medical condition causing him to split into two people, or is he simply dealing with the trauma caused by his former actions, such as Love's death? Well, his relationship with Reese is complex. By believing that he has become Reese, Joe can separate himself from the crimes he is committing and exonerate himself of the guilt he might feel. As for why Joe splits into two persons in season 4, I'm going to quote Sarah Gamble, the showrunner of You. We started talking about it a couple of seasons ago. In a certain way, we see the arc of the series as Joe getting a little bit more unhinged as each season goes along. It's one way that he's accumulating consequences. She also notes that Joe's body has faced some violence throughout the series, which has only added to his current mental state. For example, he has been hit on the head multiple times, he spiked a high fever, and hallucinated. Joe's duality, in fact, goes all the way back to season 1, where Sarah Gamble notes, in the first frames of the series, in the pilot, his inner monologue is very distinct. So we've always seen him as somebody who walks around arguing with himself, agreeing with himself a lot. So we knew that this was something we were leading up to. So we need to say that by season 4, Joe survived so much. He not only murdered Love, but he's also presumed dead, having chopped off his toe to leave DNA at the scene. When he tracks down Marianne in London, she is scared of him and points out he is a murderer. And here, Joe's identity seems to shatter, and he's faced to confront his actions like never before. Sarah Gamble says to the Reese storyline, We wanted to wait until it really felt like Joe was all the way cooked and ready to do this. As I said before, we are assuming Joe has an attachment disorder, but maybe he's also living with another undiagnosed mental health condition. There were moments in season 4 when he seemingly disassociated and had no idea that he had murdered more people after all. According to Gamble, Joe's condition is far from clear-cut. It depends who you ask. If you sit down with a psychiatrist, they will probably have a real strong opinion about Joe's mental state. But I'm not a doctor, and the writer's room is not full of doctors. The team behind you has researched a plethora of conditions, but when it comes to what's going on in Joe's head, we are not writing a show to perfectly dramatize any particular syndrome. We are inspired by those things. But to us, Joe is one of one, and we're telling the story of his particular psyche. Mayo Clinic also notes that dissociative disorders, such as Joe's belief that Reese is carrying out his crimes, present as a disconnection and lack of continuity between thoughts, memories, surroundings, actions, and identity. Per the website, dissociative disorders usually develop as a reaction to trauma and help keep difficult memories at bay, which would certainly be true for Joe, considering his traumatic past. There may never be a definitive answer regarding which exact condition Joe Goldberg has, but season 4 has certainly shown that his mind is more complicated than we knew. Well, that was enough of the psychoanalysis for Joe Goldberg for today. I hope I pronounced every name correct. That is my biggest fear right now. But I don't think I can mispronounce Kelly Scott. Yeah, I hope you're a bit clearer about Joe's mind. I hope I could, help you a bit in the understanding of Joe Goldberg. I hope and pray. Well, if you like following me, don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Because unlike Joe, I promise not to read too much into it. And hey, if you need to vent about a creepy neighbor or just want to talk about theories and stuff, slide into my DMs. I won't lock you in a cage. I promise. Until next time, keep your social media on private and stay safe because you never know who's watching. Bye!